Professor Krenthak adjusted his 3 pairs of spectacles with obvious irritation. The morning light streaming through the crystal dome of Andorian University's most prestigious lecture hall caught his purple scales just right, making him look every bit the pompous academic he truly was. "Students," he barked, his voice echoing off the polished walls. "Today we continue our fascinating study of extinct galactic species. And what better way to start than with the most ridiculous myth in our databases?" A few groans rippled through the packed auditorium. Krenthak's reputation for dramatic storytelling was legendary, and not in a good way. "Ah, yes, I can hear your excitement already," he said, dripping with sarcasm. "Today we discuss the so-called humans of the mythical planet Earth." Student Zal Thorpe in the front row visibly slumped in his seat. "Professor, didn't we cover this last semester? And the semester before that?" Krenthak's eye stalks swiveled toward the unfortunate student. "Young Zalthorpe, repetition is the mother of learning. Besides, these creatures are so absurdly impossible that we must constantly remind ourselves why they never could have existed." He activated his holographic display with a flourish. Behold, the human, a bipedal figure appeared, looking remarkably ordinary compared to the various tentacled, scaled, and crystalline beings in the audience. According to ancient databases, Krenthak continued with theatrical disgust, these creatures allegedly survived on a death world with poisonous oxygen atmosphere, crushing gravity, and predators that could tear them limb from limb. Several students snickered. The idea was genuinely absurd. But wait, there's more. Krenthak was really getting into his stride now. They supposedly had no natural armor, no venom, no telepathic abilities, and their lifespans were laughably short. Yet somehow he paused for dramatic effect. They supposedly conquered their entire planet. "That's impossible," muttered student Silen from the back row. "Exactly." Krenthak slammed his tentacle on the podium, "which is why they're a myth. No species that weak could survive, let alone thrive. It violates every known law of evolutionary biology." He began pacing dramatically. But the ancient texts get even more ridiculous. They claim humans could survive in environments that would kill most civilized species, solve problems through something called thinking outside the box, and he paused to chuckle at his own superiority, work together without a hive mind. The laughter from his students was music to his ears. Pure fantasy, of course. No individual consciousness could coordinate complex activities without proper neural linking. Krenthak smugly adjusted his spectacles again. "This is why, my dear students, we study these myths, to appreciate how fortunate we are to live in a galaxy governed by logic, reason, and proper evolutionary development." He was about to launch into his favorite part of the lecture when the university's emergency alert system suddenly activated, filling the hall with pulsing blue light. The pulsing blue alert lights bathed the lecture hall in an eerie glow as the university's security system crackled to life. "Attention all faculty and students," came the mechanical voice. "Unknown vessel approaching campus perimeter. All personnel remain calm and continue normal activities." Krenthak waved a dismissive tentacle at the announcement. "Probably just another trade delegation from the Outer Rim," he scoffed. "Security gets jumpy over nothing these days." Now, where was I? Ah yes, human impossibilities. Several students glanced nervously at the emergency lights, but Krenthak was far too absorbed in his own brilliance to care. "You see, the mythology suggests these humans could actually adapt to new situations without genetic modification." He let out a condescending chuckle. "Imagine that. Biological flexibility without proper engineering. Absolutely preposterous." The alert system buzzed again, more urgently this time. "Unknown vessel has ignored all communication attempts and is approaching the academic sector at dangerous speeds. Will someone please turn that thing off?" Krenthak snapped irritably. "I'm trying to educate young minds about the dangers of believing in fairy tales." Student Zalthorpe raised a nervous appendage. "Professor, maybe we should." "Should what?" "Panic over every little security blip." Krenthak's voice dripped with academic superiority. "This is a university, not a military base." Nothing interesting ever happens here." The words had barely left his mouth when the entire building shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling as emergency alarms began shrieking at maximum volume. "Now that," Krenthak said, adjusting his spectacles with forced calm, "was probably just a minor atmospheric disturbance. As I was saying about human mythology, crash." The reinforced wall of the lecture hall exploded inward in a shower of debris and twisted metal. Students screamed and dove for cover as a sleek, unfamiliar spacecraft punched through the university's supposedly impenetrable barrier like it was tissue paper. Steam hissed from the ship's hull as its engines powered down with mechanical precision. The craft was smaller than most shuttles, built for speed rather than comfort, and bore markings that matched no known galactic registry. Krenthak stood frozen behind his podium, his 3 pairs of spectacles askew, mouth agape in complete shock. This was definitely not in his lesson plan. The ship's airlock cycled open with a soft pneumatic hiss. A figure emerged from the smoke and debris, moving with casual confidence that seemed completely at odds with having just crashed through a wall. She was bipedal, compact, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style. Her clothing was simple but functional, and she carried herself with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in her own skin. And behind her, 3 more figures emerged from the craft. The woman surveyed the chaos with mild interest, noting the cowering students and the paralyzed professor. Her eyes settled on the holographic display still floating above Krenthak's podium, showing the mythical human figure. Well, she said, her voice carrying easily through the stunned silence. "Did someone say humans were extinct?" Every eye in the lecture hall turned to stare at her. The resemblance to the holographic display was unmistakable. "I'm Captain Riley Martinez," she continued conversationally, as if introducing herself at a dinner party rather than standing in the wreckage of a classroom. "And I have to say, Professor," she squinted at his nameplate. "Krenthak, is it? Your facts need some serious updating." One of her companions, a tall man with grease-stained hands, grinned broadly. "Riley, I think we just crashed his lecture on mythology." "Literally crashed it," Tomás added, a woman in medical scrubs, checking a small device in her hand. "Good thing their structural integrity is better than their security systems." The 4th crew member, a younger man with sharp eyes, was already scanning the room. "Captain, we've got about 47 very confused aliens and 1 professor who looks like he's about to faint." Krenthak's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. His carefully constructed worldview was crumbling faster than his lecture hall wall. Riley stepped forward, debris crunching under her boots. "So, Professor Krenthak, tell me more about these impossible humans." Krenthak's academic pride finally overrode his shock. He straightened his bent spectacles and puffed out his chest scales, desperately clinging to decades of scholarly superiority. "Preposterous," he sputtered, pointing a trembling tentacle at Riley. "You cannot possibly be human. Humans are extinct. They're mythological. I have 17 degrees and 40 years of research that prove it." Riley exchanged amused glances with her crew. 17 degrees? Impressive. "What's your doctorate in, Professor?" "Xenobiology, extinct species theory, galactic history, and comparative mythology." Krenthak declared triumphantly, "I am the foremost expert on impossible life forms." "Well then," Riley said with a grin that made several students nervously edge toward the exits, "this should be educational for both of us." Krenthak's eye stalks narrowed suspiciously. "If you truly claim to be human, then prove it. Any species can look bipedal and claim impossible origins." "Fair enough," Riley nodded. "What kind of proof would satisfy your academic standards, Professor?" This was Krenthak's territory now. He felt his confidence returning as he warmed to the challenge. Humans allegedly possessed 3 impossible traits. First, they could solve complex problems without computational assistance. He activated his teaching console with a flourish. Behold, the Corvanian physics paradox. A 3-dimensional equation materialized in the air, filled with symbols that hurt to look at directly. This problem has stumped our greatest minds for centuries. No organic brain could possibly. Oh, that's easy, interrupted Tomás, the grease-stained engineer. He walked up to the floating equation and started moving symbols around with his bare hands. See, you're approaching this backwards. Instead of trying to solve for x, you solve for why x shouldn't exist in the first place. Within 30 seconds, he had rearranged the entire equation. The impossible paradox suddenly collapsed into a simple, elegant solution that made perfect sense. The lecture hall fell dead silent. That's not how mathematics works. Krenthak protested weakly. Says who? Tomás shrugged. Math is just a tool. When the tool doesn't fit the job, you modify the tool. Impossible. Next test. Krenthak was sweating now, his scales glistening under the emergency lights. Humans supposedly could heal without advanced medical technology. As if on cue, student Silen let out a pained whimper. During the crash, a piece of debris had sliced through her crystalline arm structure, leaving her with a deep, bleeding gash. Perfect timing, said Dr. Amy Chen, the woman in medical scrubs. She knelt beside the injured student with a small bag of supplies that looked positively primitive compared to the university's medical equipment. Wait, what are you doing? Silen gasped as Amy began cleaning the wound with simple antiseptic. Where are your nano-healers, your cellular regenerators? Don't need them, Amy replied calmly, threading what appeared to be actual string through a metal needle. Sometimes the old ways work better than the fancy stuff. She began stitching the wound closed with practiced efficiency. The trick isn't having the most advanced technology. It's understanding what actually needs to be fixed and using whatever works. Within minutes, Silen's wound was neatly closed and properly bandaged. The bleeding had stopped, and the injury was already beginning to heal naturally. This is basic field medicine, Amy explained to the stunned audience. We learned it because we couldn't always count on having perfect conditions or fancy equipment. Krenthak's eye stalks were practically spinning in circles. But that's so inefficient, so primitive. Maybe, Amy shrugged. But it works, and that's what matters. Final test. Krenthak declared desperately. Humans allegedly could coordinate complex activities without hive mind communication. The young man with sharp eyes stepped forward. I'm Marcus, he said simply. Watch this. Without a word, he pointed at 3 different locations around the damaged lecture hall. Riley immediately moved to secure the unstable ceiling support. Tomás began checking the damaged wall for structural integrity. Amy started organizing the scattered students into a safe evacuation formation. They worked in perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's needs and adjusting their actions accordingly. No telepathic communication, no neural linking, just pure intuitive cooperation. How? Krenthak whispered in amazement. How are you coordinating without shared consciousness? We know each other, Marcus explained as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. We've worked together, we trust each other, and we pay attention. Riley's got the strength for heavy lifting. Tomás understands structural engineering. Amy keeps everyone safe and healthy. We each do what we're best at, but that requires individual decision-making. Krenthak protested. That requires thinking for yourselves while cooperating with others. That's impossible. Riley dusted off her hands and walked back over to the thoroughly confused professor. Professor Krenthak, she said gently, I think your textbooks might need some updates. Krenthak's academic world was crumbling faster than his lecture hall wall, but his pride refused to surrender. He straightened to his full height, all 6 feet of indignant professor, and played his final card. Very well, he declared with desperate authority. If you truly are the legendary humans, then you can survive the ultimate test. The university's death maze. A collective gasp echoed through the damaged lecture hall. Even the maintenance drones seemed to pause their cleanup work. Professor, student Zalthorpe whispered urgently, nobody survives the death maze. It's designed to be impossible. Exactly. Krenthak's eye stalks gleamed with malicious satisfaction. The death maze was constructed by our finest military engineers as the ultimate test of species survival capability. It incorporates every known method of elimination: gravity wells, energy barriers, temporal distortions, pressure chambers, toxic atmospheres. Riley and her crew exchanged glances. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Sounds fun. Fun? Krenthak sputtered. It's a death trap. 67 different species have attempted it. The mortality rate is 100%. Well, Riley said cheerfully, that's about to change. Lead the way, Professor. The journey to the university's underground testing facility gave Krenthak time to regain his confidence. He strutted ahead of the group, pontificating about the maze's sophisticated design while his students followed at a safe distance. The entrance alone has eliminated 17 different species, he bragged as they approached a massive titanium door covered in warning symbols. The initial pressure differential is designed to crush any being not properly equipped with environmental suits. Noted, Tomás said, cracking his knuckles like he was preparing for a pleasant workout. The door cycled open with an ominous hiss, revealing a chamber that looked like something from a nightmare. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent warnings, the floor shifted unpredictably, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with hostile energy. According to the rules, Krenthak announced pompously, you must navigate through 17 chambers, each more deadly than the last. You may use only standard equipment, no modifications allowed, and you must follow the designated path. Any deviation results in immediate disqualification. What happens if we get disqualified? Amy asked casually. Death. Krenthak replied with obvious satisfaction. The maze doesn't give second chances. Riley surveyed the entrance chamber with the same casual interest she'd shown when crashing through the lecture hall. Rules, huh? Designated path? Standard equipment only? Those are the parameters that make it scientifically valid. Krenthak insisted. Right, Riley nodded thoughtfully. Then she turned to her crew. So, what do you think? Follow the rules and probably die, or solve the actual problem? Definitely solve the problem, Marcus said immediately. Agreed, said Tomás, already examining the wall construction with professional interest. The rules are stupid anyway, Amy added, checking her medical kit. Who designs a test where everyone dies? That's cheating. Krenthak protested. You cannot simply ignore the parameters. Watch us, Riley grinned. What happened next would be discussed in academic circles for decades to come. Instead of entering the first chamber through the designated door, Tomás simply punched through the wall beside it. His enhanced human strength, combined with an understanding of structural weak points, created a perfectly serviceable hole in about 30 seconds. Shortcut, he announced cheerfully. The first chamber's gravity well activated automatically, designed to crush anyone foolish enough to step on the floor. The humans simply swung across the ceiling using Amy's medical tubing tied together into makeshift ropes. The floor is lava. Marcus called out with genuine delight, treating the deadly chamber like a childhood game. Chamber 2 featured toxic atmosphere designed to poison any species within minutes. Amy simply held her breath while the others fashioned breathing masks from torn clothing and activated charcoal from Tomás's engineering supplies. Basic chemistry, she explained to the horrified observers watching through security feeds, activated carbon filters most toxins. We learned this in elementary school. Chamber 3's energy barriers were designed to fry anyone who touched them. Riley and her crew simply used Marcus's belt buckle as a conductor, channeling the energy into the facility's own power grid and causing a convenient system overload. If you can't go through a barrier, Riley explained conversationally, make the barrier work for you. By Chamber 7, the humans had stopped even pretending to take the maze seriously. They were having too much fun. Tomás had fashioned climbing tools from broken maze components. Amy was using medical supplies to create improvised explosives for wall breaching. Marcus had figured out how to reprogram the maze's own security systems. Riley was coordinating everything while simultaneously solving physics puzzles that should have taken hours. This is impossible. Krenthak wailed as he watched his ultimate test being turned into what appeared to be the galaxy's most dangerous playground. They're breaking every rule, ignoring every protocol. Maybe, said student Silen, whose arm was healing nicely thanks to Amy's primitive medicine. That's the point? Chamber 12 was designed to separate team members and force individual survival. Instead, the humans used Amy's medical equipment to create a communication system, Tomás's engineering knowledge to modify the chamber's layout, and Marcus's tactical thinking to coordinate their escape. We stick together, Riley announced as they blasted through another wall. That's rule number 1. But individual survival is more efficient. Krenthak protested weakly. Efficient for who? Amy called back, helping Tomás through a hole they'd improvised in the floor. We're not trying to be efficient. We're trying to win. By Chamber 15, even the maze's automated systems seemed confused. Alarms were blaring, emergency lights were flashing, and half the facility's security protocols were running simultaneously. The humans emerged from the final chamber laughing, covered in dust and debris, looking like they'd just finished the most entertaining afternoon of their lives. Well, Riley said, brushing off her clothes, that was refreshing. Thanks for the workout, Professor. Krenthak stared at the smoking remains of his ultimate test, his worldview completely shattered. You turned my death maze into a fun puzzle? Tomás suggested helpfully. A team-building exercise, Amy added. A learning experience? Marcus chimed in. But you broke all the rules, Krenthak whispered in horror. Riley walked over and patted the devastated professor gently on his scaled shoulder. Professor, I think we need to talk about what rules are really for. Back in the ruins of the lecture hall, Krenthak slumped behind his podium like a deflated balloon. His 3 pairs of spectacles hung crooked, his scales had lost their pompous shine, and his entire academic identity lay in shambles around him. I don't understand, he whispered, staring at the humans who had just casually demolished everything he thought he knew about the universe. If you've been real this whole time, then where have you been? Why did we think you were extinct? Riley settled onto a piece of debris with the casual grace that seemed to define everything humans did. Well, Professor, that's an interesting story. Mind if I borrow your lecture hall for a minute? She gestured to her crew, who immediately began helping the fascinated students find stable seating among the wreckage. It was exactly the kind of effortless cooperation that Krenthak had just witnessed in the death maze. The truth is, Riley began, we've been watching the galaxy for about 300 years now, ever since we figured out faster than light travel and realized we weren't alone out here. Student Zalthorpe raised a tentative appendage. But why did you let us think you were myths? Marcus grinned. Strategic advantage. Think about it. Would you be more careful around a species you thought was extinct, or one you knew was actively monitoring your activities? We learned early on, Amy added, checking Zelan's healing wound, that most galactic species follow predictable patterns, hierarchies, protocols, established methods, very organized. Boring, Tomás corrected cheerfully. The word you're looking for is boring. Riley nodded. We realized that if everyone knew humans were real, they'd try to fit us into their existing frameworks. Make us follow their rules, join their councils, adopt their methods. And that sounded terrible, Marcus said with obvious distaste. Krenthak's eye stalk swiveled desperately between the humans. But the academic databases. The research. How did you manage to become mythological? Oh, that was easy, Riley laughed. We just made sure that every time someone encountered us, it seemed impossible. A few well-placed stories about mysterious saviors who appeared and vanished, some contradictory evidence here and there, a little help from species who owed us favors. You see, Amy explained to the stunned professor, most species need things to make sense. When they encountered evidence of humans that didn't fit their scientific models, they chose to believe we were myths rather than question their models. It's actually a common psychological phenomenon, Marcus added helpfully. Cognitive dissonance. When reality conflicts with established beliefs, most beings choose to deny reality. Krenthak felt his academic world collapse completely. You mean all my research, all my theories were hilariously wrong, Tomás said with cheerful bluntness, but entertaining. We've been monitoring galactic universities for decades. Your lectures were some of our favorites. You've been watching my lectures? Krenthak's voice cracked with humiliation. Oh yes, Riley grinned. Especially the one where you explained how human teamwork was impossible because it violated thermodynamics. That one had us laughing for weeks. The students were staring at their professor with a mixture of pity and fascination. Everything they thought they knew about Krenthak's expertise had just evaporated. But Professor, student Xylen said gently, maybe this is a good thing? Maybe we can learn about real humans instead of made-up ones? Krenthak looked up at Riley with the expression of a drowning man grasping for a lifeline. You would teach me? After I spent decades proving you couldn't exist? That's exactly why we'd teach you, Amy said warmly. You're not the first academic we've had to correct, and you won't be the last. The fact that you're willing to admit you were wrong? That's already more progress than most species make. Riley stood up and extended her hand to the shattered professor. Professor Krenthak, how would you like to learn what humans are really like? Not from ancient databases or theoretical models, but from actual experience? Krenthak stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment. Everything he had built his career on was wrong. His reputation was destroyed. His carefully constructed expertise was worthless. And yet, for the first time in decades, he felt genuinely excited about learning something new. Ah, yes, he said quietly, reaching out to shake Riley's hand. I would like that very much. Excellent. Riley's grin was infectious. First lesson, humans don't hold grudges against people who are willing to learn from their mistakes. Second lesson, added Tomás, we actually enjoy proving academic experts wrong. It's one of our favorite hobbies. Third lesson, Amy contributed, sometimes the best teachers are the ones who thought they knew everything and discovered they knew nothing. Marcus nodded sagely. And fourth lesson, being wrong about everything just means you get to discover how right everything really is. For the first time since the humans had crashed through his wall, Professor Krenthak smiled. It was a small, uncertain smile, but it was genuine. Where do we begin? He asked. 3 hours later, as campus maintenance crews worked to repair the massive hole in the lecture hall, Riley and her crew began preparing for departure. Their ship's engines hummed to life with mechanical precision. Professor Krenthak watched them with newfound respect and lingering confusion. Wait, he called out as they headed toward their vessel. I still don't understand something. Why did you come here today? Why reveal yourselves now? Riley paused at the airlock and turned back with that mischievous grin that was becoming very familiar. Oh, that's the best part, Professor. We didn't just happen to crash your lecture. What do you mean? Krenthak's eye stalks focused intently on her. We came here specifically because of you, Marcus explained, barely containing his laughter. Your lectures on human impossibility have been circulating through our networks for months. Circulating how? Krenthak asked with growing dread. Entertainment purposes, Tomás said cheerfully. We've been monitoring galactic universities for decades, collecting the most hilariously wrong information about humans. Your lectures are legendary. Amy pulled out a small device and activated a holographic display. You currently hold the record for most inaccurate human facts per minute. 47 completely wrong statements in a single lecture. That's impressive even by galactic academic standards. Krenthak's scales flushed deep purple with embarrassment. You mean you came here to mock me? Not mock, Riley corrected gently. Educate. There's a difference. Besides, someone who can be that confidently wrong about everything might actually be capable of being spectacularly right once they get proper information. Plus, Marcus added with a grin, we had a bet running about whether we could survive your death maze. Tomás said it would take us 20 minutes. I said 15. How long did it actually take? Student Zalthorpe asked curiously. 12 minutes, Amy replied proudly. New record. Krenthak shook his head in amazement. You turned the most deadly challenge in galactic academic history into a recreational activity. Everything's recreational if you approach it right, Riley said, stepping into her ship. Remember that when you're rewriting your curriculum, Professor. As the humans prepared to depart, Krenthak called out one final question. Where will you go now? Riley's voice carried clearly from the airlock. Oh, we heard there's a professor on Centauri Prime who's been teaching a course on why human mathematics is impossible. Apparently, he's got some very creative theories about our alleged inability to count past 10. The ship lifted off smoothly, leaving behind only a professor-shaped hole in the wall and a completely transformed academic. 6 months later, Professor Krenthak's new course, Practical Human Studies, What We Got Wrong and Why, had a waiting list 3 semesters long. Students came from across the galaxy to hear him explain, with hard-earned humility, the difference between theoretical impossibility and practical reality. Late one evening, as he worked on updating his lecture notes, Krenthak paused and muttered to himself, "Humans, somehow they're even more impossible than I originally thought. The difference is, now I know impossible doesn't mean what I thought it meant." He smiled and went back to rewriting everything he thought he knew about the universe. The end.